Hi everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to be speaking about this upcoming penumbral lunar eclipse taking place in the sign of Capricorn on the 4th or 5th of July, depending on where you are on the planet. This eclipse slash full moon, because basically every lunar eclipse is also a full moon, is going to be quite powerful for a number of different reasons. But of course, I know that I said that about all the eclipses that have been taken place so far, but each and every one of them was actually quite unique and powerful in their own special way. For example, past solar eclipse in the sign of Cancer was really potent because the energies were extremely fertile and very karmic in a very positive sense because it was that much close to the North Node. So either way, it represents a powerful new beginning, solutions, everything that we need in our lives to progress, to go forward, to evolve, to step into the next and new chapter of our lives. But this is where this eclipse, this lunar eclipse, it is all about terminations, endings, culmination of the lunar cycle, an extremely potent manifestation or karmic discharge, and of course we cannot ignore the revelatory energy of any full moon because it simply shines light on that area of life and it exposes everything that was hidden, everything that was ignored, everything that just didn't enter our awareness. So either way, it is definitely going to be a massive game changer. Now this eclipse is quite notorious because it took place under very similar conditions in 2001, where the date is exactly the same, the 4th and 5th of July, depending on where you are on the planet. And 13 degrees of Capricorn is also one thing that these eclipses have in common. And of course, unfortunately, we know how the eclipse in 2001 manifested ultimately in September, and I'm referring to 9/11, and it makes so much sense if we look at the big picture, as in Capricorn is definitely centralized power, it is patriarchy, it is rigid rules and traditions, customs, dogma and all of that, and an eclipse is not possible if this phenomenon doesn't happen very close to the nodes of the moon. So back then the nodes of the moon were in Cancer Capricorn axis, so that basically represents the dark side of centralized power, abuse of power, the dark side of tradition, custom, dogma, rigid and almost fanatical way of perceiving religion or control or anything like that. So of course it manifested as violence, it manifested as a big shocking moment, an eye-opener for all of us, and it really doesn't matter, there are so many conspiracies behind 9/11, it doesn't really matter how it took place, what triggered it, how it came into existence. What matters is that it happened, and it was very symbolic because we were invited by the karmic forces to stop all of that, to change our ways, to mature, to free ourselves from religion, from dogma, from fanaticism, from all those expressions of centralized power, patriarchy, control and power that are very unhealthy, destructive, and simply do not reflect whatsoever who we are as a species in the present moment. Those might have reflected much more authentically who we were maybe 500 years ago, but ultimately we're not the same people, we're not the same species, nothing is the same in the present moment. That's why the events of 2001 were so very symbolic. And chances are, if we have learned the lessons, if we have taken everything into consideration, if the destructive nature of fanaticism entered our awareness deeply, and all of us became just a little bit more open minded, more tolerant, less rigid, much more human, and we value and, respect and honor our free wills, then there is absolutely no reason why it should play out once more in such a very violent and dramatic manner. But either way, it is still a powerful karmic eclipse, so it is definitely going to trigger a big completion, a big culmination, a karmic discharge, if you will. So, whatever we need to progress with, work through, eliminate, do differently, from the past, it will manifest in a very symbolic and eye opener way. And let's just hope who we became, that however the events of 9/11 influenced us to evolve to become more than we were back then, all of that is enough for this eclipse not to trigger such a violent, such a horrific and shocking manifestation. But either way, regardless of how we look at it, religion, dogma, customs, traditions, abuse of power, control, manipulation, and all of that will definitely be part of the symbolism of this eclipse, because the south node is in Sagittarius, and the dark side of Sagittarius is religion, the most negative, destructive, manipulative, and toxic expressions of religion, where it's not just a high philosophy, it is not just an aspiration to connect to the divine, but rather it is a tool to control masses, to create fear, to enslave the souls and the minds of people. So, where all of us are going to be invited by this eclipse to do things differently, and if this manipulatory expression of religion is still present in our lives, in our normality, well, this is where we have to eliminate it. And let's just look at the sign of Cancer, the opposite sign, because the full moon is basically the opposition of the sun and the moon, and the sun is going to be illuminating this moon from 13 degrees of Cancer. So that represents the power of the people, that represents healing, emotional clarity, valuing our cultures of origin, our ancestors, our morality, all the positive side of our education that we received from our families or from our culture, society, whatever. And also Cancer is the symbolism of the mother, so the matriarchy basically. And it has very gentle, nourishing, intuitive, spiritual qualities to it. Exactly the opposite of the religious fanaticism and patriarchy. So the light of the sun is going to infuse the moon with all of these qualities, all of this symbolism, and illuminate Capricorn in the light of progress, in the light of whatever we need to do to solve the situation. And the sun, even though it's not going to be technically conjunct the north node, an eclipse still has so much to do with it. And the north node is in 29 degrees of Gemini, the opposite sign of Sagittarius. And Gemini basically is applied knowledge, information, clarity, owning your truth, and the north node making significant progress with it. And progress is not just morality, not just self-discipline, not just a pure heart and mind. Venus is also in Gemini in this period, but also science, technology, a practical way to apply information, education, in order to find solution to any problem, to get the very best expression of who we are in the present moment, and just use all the power, potency, and fertility of our minds and intellects through communication, through sharing information, through study and research, and that study and research being aligned with morality, with our highest spiritual principles, in order, to make a huge quantum leap, to step into the futures, and, to eliminate all the symbolism of the South Node in Sagittarius, all the problems and the lessons of the past. A very famous occultist, Cornelius Agrippa, thought that the nodes of the moon are like a dragon, where the north node is its head and the south node is its tail, so very close to the anus basically, which represents excrement, which represents shedding off the old, shedding off the mistakes of the past, everything that no longer serves us, everything that was already digested. So if we don't eliminate it, it blocks us, it pollutes us, it poisons us. And right now, unhealthy spirituality, unhealthy life views, perceptions, worldviews, unhealthy ways to apply science, because when we create fear, conspiracies, strife, hatred, violence with scientific progress, then we are not doing something right at all. And if the notion of equality, of justice, of equity doesn't serve our greatest good because it leads to greater conflict, then also we have to change our ways and we have to learn from the past. And we have such a very, very rich past, and all of it is recorded in history. So, it's not like we don't have the source of information and inspiration of what not to do, what mistakes and patterns not to repeat. But we need to become aware, and we need to let all these lessons sink in and guide us, guide that exalted north node in the sign of Gemini, for us to achieve progress, to upgrade our education systems. And by this I mean a total upgrade, not just the information, how the information is being shared, but everything. Because just like a couple of decades ago, there was a huge reformation in the education system, where information was so very accessible and valuable, and it shaped and formed the individual and strengthened the mind. But the moral education part was actually the dark side of everything, because it was very rigid, it was very aggressive. It basically taught the individual a survival mentality, a very aggressive survival mentality. So yes, the mind was empowered greatly, and the information helped those generations, including my generations. So the information part was true alchemical gold. But the other part of the education, where we were taught to survive by all means necessary, we were taught to do everything in our power and sacrifice everything just for recognition, just for material stability, just for professional success in our careers and in our jobs and all of that. And that basically was a massive psychological, emotional disadvantage. And for so very many people, regardless of their place in the world, their culture, their country, it was already a source of massive trauma, because the information was great and their minds were extremely powerful, but their souls, their moral systems, their inner psychology basically led them to become handicapped emotionally, because not every person can set themselves up internally to live life as in a constant state of survival mentality, greed, how to gain, how to achieve just material security. Most people have totally different priorities, so their education system, the education systems basically crippled them for life. And that is why so many psychologists, therapists, astrologers, name them whatever you want, are needed right now, because they're not just healing the, karmic blockages that a person might have experienced and it left a trauma or anything. Mostly they're healing old education, they're healing misaligned beliefs, they're healing old programmings which stem from a very unhealthy education system. And I mean here, it's not the information, the science that was delivered that was the problem, but the morality, the psychology, the manipulation, the conditioning. That was the massive problem. And this very second, we see all of that in a massive karmic mirror, where we have all the information, all the technology, and it cannot help us combat a simple virus because we lack the morality, we lack the attitude, we lack the solidarity, we lack the compassion, we lack the ability to understand each other profoundly and at a soul level. We lack so very many emotional traits that should have been delivered to us because, for example, the ancients had all of this morality, but they didn't have the science. So of course their ways ultimately turned into dogma and rigid beliefs because the Gemini part of all of this was missing. But now we have the Gemini part but don't have the most positive and uplifting expression of the Sagittarian part or the Capricorn part basically, because centralized power is just as toxic as it ever was in the history of humankind. May we refer to it as, the kingdoms and civilizations of old. May we look at the political organizations of ancient Greece and Rome and all of that. May we look at socialism, fascism, totalitarianism. It doesn't really matter because basically it's just the same. We're continuing the main theme just in a very different manner. But just because it is different, it does give the illusion that we live in a free society, that we have, democracy, but that is just an illusion. This is, in this present moment, are we actually seeing what it is in reality, what it is in truth? And the truth is that even though it offers the impression that there's so much freedom and human being oriented, humanitarianism, but it actually isn't, because all of this is about big corporations, big pharma, and everything controlling the population, controlling society, controlling the choices and perceptions of the individual. So it is even more slavery than it was ever before, because at least in the past, it was obvious, it wasn't hidden whatsoever. It was the way of centralized power or the highway, but in the present moment, it is all a big illusion and a deception because it still is pretty much their way or the highway. But when they gave the impression that we do have a choice, we do have a word, we do have a saying and all of that, well then we are struggling to have that saying, but no one's taking it into consideration. And this is exactly what this Capricorn eclipse is going to be highlighting, shedding light on. And this is a very powerful revelatory light because this eclipse, the main aspect that it forms is a trine to Uranus, the planet of objective truth, reality, revolution, awakening, information, but the most highest expression of the cerebral activities. So it is basically as objective as a truth can be for a human being. And also it is a very surprising energy, a shocking energy. So whatever truths are going to be revealed are going to impact all of us in a very, very profound way. And even if that truth is shocking, unpleasant, it is still going to catapult us in a very quick and instant way into the future, because that is what Uranus does. But if all of this wasn't enough, at the time of the eclipse, the Sun is conjunct the fixed star Sirius, And that means that this full moon is going to oppose Sirius. So that is a very powerful karmic energy, especially that this conjunction with Sirius is very, very close and tight, because Sirius is approximately at 14 degrees of Cancer, while the Sun is 13 degrees and a couple of minutes Cancer. So that is a very tight conjunction. And you know, Sirius is all about power. It has very Jupiterian qualities because it expands, it empowers, it infuses energy, it infuses truth, but also creational power. This is like the Jupiterian type of symbolism of Sirius, but it has also Martian qualities. So you know, it's all about basically the power of the people. What people desire, what people plan to accomplish, what is needed, what actions, what manifestations, what karmic, you know, a gentle push in the back all of us need in order to progress. So whatever that full moon is going to illuminate, shed light on, pull to the surface is going to be very, very important and very, very relevant. So from my personal opinion, it is the information that is going to be revealed not just around the time of this eclipse, so the 4th or 5th of July, but also in the coming next 3 months, 6 months even. And it is the information, the truth, the revelation, the disclosures, the, you know, bringing secrets to the light of our awareness. That is going to be the most impactful manifestation of this eclipse. Of course, for us individually, this can be a very positive and uplifting energy, because Capricorn is the sign of manifestation. It is where things are getting done. And since this is a highly karmic energy, it can represent a karmic closure, a karmic completion, an ending, but of course which serves your greatest good. It can also be a very wonderful manifestation. For example, harvesting the fruits of your labor, because both Uranus and this moon are speaking from earth signs, and a trine is a blessing after all. But even without a trine, Capricorn is, you know, work, it is sacrifice, it is applying knowledge, mastery, skills, investing time, effort, and energy into accomplishing something. So if you have done that regarding an area of life where Capricorn falls into your personal chart, well, there is no reason why this couldn't be a very powerful karmic harvest where you just get the fruits of your labor. It can be a really important culmination of your career, of your job, of your soul path, of your soul mission. For example, if you will need allies, partners, associates, someone to help you, guide you, teach you, to enter your life, that can also be a case, because you know, Uranus is the planet of surprises. So someone can contact you, get in touch with you in a very unexpected and sudden way. So personally, this is much more good news than anything bad, because even if it's a loss, even if it's a termination of anything, even if it's an ending, it ultimately serves your greatest good. And without that ending in your life, you wouldn't be able to move forward. So either way, personally, I do believe that for most people, it is going to be a really positive and useful manifestation. And another element to it is one of profound and deep transformation, both individually and collectively. Because let's just ignore the eclipse, the full moon right now, and go a little bit further into Capricorn. And by the time of this eclipse, we have Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in the sign of Capricorn, where Jupiter and Pluto are closely conjunct with one another, and all of these are retrograde. So that represents the deconstruction and ultimately coming up with the plans how to reconstruct centralized power. Jupiter is the planet of truth, of justice, the planet of expansion, and Pluto is the divine surgeon because it pulls everything hidden, concealed, secrets, everything to the surface and forcing us to observe it, confront it. So for centralized power, for governments, organizations, big corporations, this is not the best of news because on one hand, they are going to be challenged from each and every possible angle, direction, but at the same time, this also means inner conflict because some people, who are part of them are just going to be awakened to the fact that they need to expose everything that they know, they need to tell the truth, they need to save themselves, they need to ring the alarm bell. So you can imagine what inner turmoil, conflict and complications they are going to be facing. And one way or another, all of us, the citizens, Cancer basically, are going to see this play out. Even if it's not, in a very direct manner, we still are going to suspect whatever is going on in truth inside the organizations and governments. So we can expect very powerful, very symbolic and eye-opener manifestations, where this energy can expose corruption, nepotism, flaws, mistakes, bad judgment, bad decisions, corruption within the legal systems. So basically, we're in deep water. We're in the eye of the storm. So this eclipse just adds to this. It just amplifies it. It just turns it critical. So once again, the Capricorn bomb, so to speak, is going to detonate and explode. And another element to this has to do with the past. It has to do with the 12th of January 2020, when we had the Saturn and Pluto conjunction, an extraordinary rare and karmic aspect which brought forth the coronavirus and the huge economic and social disaster. And that will continue. The theme of that, the next phase of the manifestation of that karma is going to continue. So we are in deep waters, all of us. But if we have solidarity, compassion, empathy, the highest qualities of Cancer, and of course of Gemini, interhuman connections, one-on-one, brotherhood, sisterhood, seeing another person as just an equal of you basically. This is the medicine, this is the solution, this is what we have to embody and absorb within ourselves to counter all the problems that can arise on the world stage and, link to that in our own personal lives as well, because what is above is below. So the problems on the world stage are definitely going to manifest in our lives one way or another. But this beautiful sextile, a celestial conversation of supreme harmony between Mercury retrograde. So Mercury retrograde is in the sign of Cancer. So Cancer is greatly emphasized. Our emotional intelligence, our empathy, our intuition, our spirituality, our solidarity, the deep love that we share. All of that is greatly emphasized because this is a very, very profound healing energy, because that Mercury retrograde, so its symbolism is inward. It has effect even on the past. It is healing past, present and future emotionally, and it sextiles Uranus, its higher octave, so it's all about the higher self as well. It is our divine intelligence helping us, inspiring us, guiding us, infusing us with celestial power to heal and to embody the most highest elevated divine qualities, the divine feminine basically, of Cancer, so that we can combat all the turmoil that is going to eventually take place in the symbolism of Capricorn, so centralized power and everything related to it. This is where everything is going to transform. There is absolutely no way back. No way back to our old normalities of how things used to be just 3-4 months ago. And also, Venus in the sign of Gemini is helping us to perceive the future, the solutions, the progress, the will to make it in a very, very loving and harmonious way. Because Venus, right now in Gemini, and also in the time of this eclipse, she is direct. So basically, we are applying all the major lessons that we have learned through this Venus retrograde period. So basically, to hold the mind and the heart in balance, to make them cooperate, to make them act in a symbiotic manner and not in a conflictual manner. And that is a massive celestial blessing, because when even our thoughts are infused with love, with gentleness, with value and worth, the highest qualities of Venus, well, that gives us the magnetic power of Venus, basically, the divine feminine, to attract the most ideal solutions in our lives. And if we unite our powers, even collectively. And also around this time, we have to mention Mars, because Mars is in its home sign of Aries, where it is extremely potent and it can bring forward its highest qualities. And Mars is very, very action oriented. It is the activator. So everything it touches, it activates, it makes it dynamic, it makes it manifest, it makes it discharge, basically. And it sextiles Venus. So that gives us potential, momentum, inspiration, courage, faith, love, in order to accomplish whatever we desire. And this is the most positive expression of this Mars, because later on in the year, it is going to retrograde in this part of the sky, in its home sign, and that is going to be extremely uncomfortable and violent for all of us, especially that this is where it's going to stay for the next 6 months. So we'll have a very strong Martian influence in our lives. And right now at the beginning, where it's only in the very first degrees of its home sign, we get the chance to see its more positive and uplifting, motivational energy, ambition, determination, passion, courage, everything that has to do with Mars manifestation. But later on, this can turn to frustration, violence, lashing out, the wrong kind of courage. And also later on in the year, it will meet with his sister Eris, also in Aries, and they will square together, as in an aspect of maximum tension, all the planets in Capricorn, so Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. And that is going to be an extremely violent uprising, because Aries is the female awakener. It is the feminine expression of the warrior of Mars. So it's going to trigger people, citizens. It will awaken their rebellious instincts. It will awaken their desires for freedom, for equality, for the highest principles. And they're definitely going to take action. So basically, this will be like almost a mirror of the events which took place last year, with the Hong Kong protests and all of that. With the protests in France and in the countries of South America and all that. So it's going to be a very, very assertive energy, and we need to prepare for that. And if we do not tap into the assertiveness, the violence, the rage of our primordial selves, of our, excessive survival mentality, which is the source of all this aggression, then we are actually harmonizing this energy. Because if fewer and fewer and fewer people go out and take physical action, well, that means that it cannot turn to excessive violence. It can just stay of being an ideological, philosophical, political, social, legislative warfare, psychological warfare, needless to say. but not a physical warfare, and that makes so much difference. Now, even though some people may think right now, well, how are we going to, combat centralized power if we don't fight physically? But we are not the same people, we are not the same species, we are not on the same level. This is where, like it or not, the essence of all of this is for us to fight with our minds, with the manifestation potential of our minds, mind over matter. This is where we have to tap into the quantic knowledge, which is, true science, quantum physics, that we can accomplish anything just by setting our intention, our focus, our energy, our minds and emotions onto it. We can create it into reality. And this is the weapon that we have to use, and not our aggression, not our physical bodies, basically. If we go out on the streets, if we fight physically, if we do harm, well then we haven't learned any lesson at all. And then that North Node in Sagittarius is going to sweep over a wave of bad karma, of violence, of misery over all of us. So history will instantly repeat. And basically the main idea is to use the power of our minds, our morality, our spiritual, or even just intellectual, even scientific powers to substitute physical violence with the sheer force of our wills. This is why we're heading into a quantum age, quantum entanglement, a multi-dimensional reality, and our science, quantum physics, cosmology, all of that, even neurology, even genetics is reflecting to all of us that that is real, that is a viable theory. We are discovering infinite number of spatial anomalies in, the cosmos, which make absolutely no sense in Newtonian physics. So basically, the universe is inviting us to become aware that reality is just what we make of it, and it is not set in stone. The most appropriate method to study physics and nature and the mysteries of the universe is exactly to acknowledge that it's not rigid, not set in stone, that it is always changing, adapting, flowing. So something that is 1,000,000% true in this present moment, for example gravity, might be very different in certain different circumstances, or in a different area, dimension of space-time. So basically, if nothing is set in stone, our society and our material situations and how we live as a species, that is also not set in stone. So all we need to do is will and think, basically, and feel our futures into existence. And chances are, if all of us become aware of just how powerful creators we are, if all of us know without a shadow of a doubt that our minds are divine gateways to creation, well then do we actually need any kind of violence or protest or anything like that? All we need to do is just focus on ourselves and the well-beings of our collective, and that's all it takes to change everything in a very peaceful and quantic way. Now, why I'm telling you all of this is because the sky speaks about incredible violence upcoming in this autumn, even at the end of the summer. But this is where there is absolutely no reason why all this setup should be playing out as it did in the past. For example, the transit of Mars and the connections that Mars is making are very similar to the Second World War. And I said this lunar eclipse is very similar to 2001. And the Saturn and Pluto conjunction is very similar to the Protestant movement 500 years ago. And all of these massively changed the world forever. But this is where we don't have to change it with violence. we can change it with creativity. And this was the big essence of the Cancer solar eclipse. At 0 degrees of Cancer, creativity. We have so much divine resource within our minds, within our genes, within our emotions, our consciousness, simply said. So let's use it. Let's use that creativity to make life and reality what we want it to be. If reality is just a big hologram, and it kind of is because the most relevant scientific research points to it, that nothing is that real, nothing is that fixed and stable, well then let's just use this potential and this blessing that was offered to humankind, this knowledge which the ancients have known ever since the dawn of time. Let's just see the Kabbalah, for example, the Judeo-Christian mysticism and their philosophies, their methodologies, the ancient Egypt, Babylon, ancient Sumeria, the most advanced cultures of the Americas, of that continent, and the shamanic and druidic people of Europe, not to mention China and the Hindu culture, the Buddhism and all of that. So basically we have known this ever since the dawn of time, just that we couldn't interpret this information in a very Gemini way, so we couldn't make it practical. That's why it had so much ritual attached to it, because we only perceived the multidimensional and holographic nature of the universe through the symbolism of Sagittarius. So it had to have some kind of religious attachment, because otherwise we just couldn't have embodied it. And we didn't possess the practical information of Gemini. But you see, this is the big blessing right now, because we have everything now. We have the South Node in Sagittarius, so all of the knowledge, culture, everything that the ancients have offered to us. But now we also have that North Node, exalted North Node in the sign of Gemini. So that means we also have all the scientific research and the mental capacity, the higher functions of our brains to decipher it, interpret it, use it very practically. And that is why this year in 2020 we are in such a superior position where we can actually create everything that we want. The only necessity is to use that Mars correctly and to ambition ourselves, even our primordial selves, our instincts, our reptilian minds, our subconscious, the inner child, who we are at the very, very core of our human beings, the animal inside including. So we have to ambition that Aries so that we can use our creative energies without allowing our minds and the external conditions to fill us with doubt and to defeat us even before we go and do the work. This is where we have to believe with everything that we have that we are creators, we are divine sparks, and we can change everything. And basically this is the only weapon, the only tool that we need to not just navigate through successfully this period, but also to create the future that we would like to experience, and to complement the energies of 21st December 2020, the moment the Great Conjunction takes place in Aquarius. So thank you so much for listening. Please remember that you don't need to take any violent action. No matter how serious, how upsetting, frustrating the situation might be, either in your personal life or simply your reaction to the global situation, please try your very, very best to uphold a state of inner harmony, of detachment, not allowing yourself to be sucked into the drama. Thank you once again. Wish everyone a blessed and magical eclipse. Until next time, bye for now.